Hello and welcome to this week's IG Live. We are going to be talking to Dr. Haleh Massey and talking to her about her middle grade novel. She has a graphic novel and another middle grade novel we're going to be talking about. If you haven't entered our giveaway, make sure to do this when you're done watching because we are giving away signed copies of both of her books. Hello. Make sure you do enter that giveaway. It ends tonight at midnight, so don't miss out. Like I said, we're giving away signed copies of both of her books. Hello,
Hi,
how are you?
good, Leanna. How are you doing? Thank you for
Good.
having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to talk with you. Like I said, I really enjoyed reading your book. So why don't you
Thank you.
introduce yourself and tell us what was your journey to becoming an author?
Sure. My name is Dr. Haleh Massey. I'm a clinical psychologist and a marriage and family therapist. I have a private practice in Westlake Village with my husband, best friend, therapist, screenwriter, Chris Massey. And I'm also a middle grade author. Last year, I came out with a middle grade graphic novel. It's called Say Something Poupeh Babaee. Came out with Little Bee Books, and it's illustrated by the amazing Ghazal Qadri. And just a few weeks ago, actually, I came out with my other middle grade novel. It's called My Name is Harriet Mansoor, Not Harry Mansoor. And that one's illustrated by the also amazing Rashin Kheiriyeh. And that one came out with two books, which is an imprint of Lee and Low. And my journey to become an author was a very long one. I studied for a long time to become a psychologist, and so I didn't have a lot of time to write for fun. When I finally finished my studies, and I wanted to write a manuscript, it wasn't so easy. It was a lot of floating heads and long monologues, not a lot of plot. Thankfully, I was very persistent, and my sister, she's a professional writer, so she helped me a lot. My husband helped me a lot. I didn't give up. And then when I finally signed with my agent, Heather Cashman, from Storm Literary, who's so wonderful and amazing, she helped me a lot with the craft as well, with plot and structure and setting and all of it, arcs. Um, and so it's been a long journey, but I finally made it.
Well, lucky for us because they're really wonderful books, and
Thank you.
I'm curious because you do have this other career, like you said, you're a licensed clinical psychologist, licensed marriage and family therapist. So how does that affect how you've written? I mean, because the books are do deal a lot with emotions. So do you kind of bring that professional background into how you write your stories?
Oh, I think absolutely, yeah. As a psychologist, I mean, I love being a psychologist. I love working with people and understanding them, why they do what they do, their thoughts, their feelings. I worked for a very long time with kids before I had my own children, and just understanding, did a lot of play therapy and um, understanding their inner most thoughts and feelings and emotions, I think really helped my writing process too. So yeah, it's all interconnected. But I think also my middle school years were very formative. They were very difficult. I can really go back to it and really feel all those feelings even right now, like
Right.
40 plus years later. So I think that has also been very helpful in my process.
Do you think that that influence, because in Say Something Poupeh Babaee, she goes and visits with the school therapist. Did that kind of influence how you wrote that character?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love adding a therapist character in my manuscripts.
I
Yeah.
love it. But you said when you first started to write that all of your characters were white because that was what you saw when that was what you had read when you grew up, and your husband was the one that said, "Hey, why don't you write more something that had to do with what how it was for you growing up?" So, how did the experience change for you when you started to do that?
Yeah. So growing up, I loved reading. I would read all the time, and Roald Dahl, Beverly Cleary, Judy Blume, they were my favorites. But there wasn't a lot of diverse characters in those books. So naturally, when I started writing, it was all white protagonists, and I didn't know any better. That was just my natural inclination. And then one day, Chris, I think I was struggling with a manuscript or landing an agent. He's like, why don't you write what you know?
Right.
And it was such a simple concept, but I had never thought about
Yeah.
it.
Yes.
And so I started doing that, and it was such a game changer. It was so easy to write. That was my voice. That's been
Mm,
my voice for so long. And I think, Leanna, that's what landed me an agent,
mm,
honestly, because I
mm,
think Heather, she resonated with that voice,
yeah.
and she knew that others would as well.
Mm.
But yeah, it took a long time for me to finally start writing Iranian protagonists, and I haven't stopped since.
Oh, I
That's
love
all I
it.
write.
Because I think you're right. I mean, all the authors you mentioned are ones I grew up reading. There was not a lot of diversity, but in particular, I can't think of any that were Middle Eastern, let alone Iranian American.
Yeah,
I mean, there aren't that many now, much
yeah,
less when we were growing up.
exactly. I think Funny and Farsi came out when I was in college, and I loved her. And Firuza Dumas came to Berkeley, and I watched her, and yeah, but there wasn't a lot.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah, I can see that. But I also love that like once you started to do that, like the voice came
it
out
just
just
came
came
so
more
naturally.
natural. Right, right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your first book, the graphic novel Say Something, Poupeh Babaee.
Yes,
It's about a young girl just immigrated to the US and she develops a selective mutism. So
yes,
maybe first you can kind of explain to us what that is, because that's part of the problem is when even when she's diagnosed, people really misunderstand which is how you have selective mutism. You're talking now.
right.
Um, right, but what is it? And then why did you decide to write about that?
Sure. So selective mutism in the DSM-5, it's categorized under an anxiety disorder.
Mm,
And it's essentially when an individual, they like stop speaking in particular situations in which they normally would speak, for example, school or the home. Oftentimes it happens in one setting, not the other. It just
mm,
depends how severe the case is. For Pupa, she stopped speaking in both settings. And I took some liberties in the book with the selective mutism diagnosis. It oftentimes happens in children 5 and under. Pupa's 10. So it does happen in some older kids and adolescents and adults, but usually 5 and under. And also, the diagnosis presents after 1 month. And,
mm.
I wanted to move the story along, so I
Right.
didn't necessarily go with that. Um, but yeah, what was your second question as far as the
Oh,
selective
this.
mutism?
Why did you decide to use that in your story?
Oh, yes. So I had a lot of clients of mine who were impacted by the Muslim travel ban, separated
Right.
from their family members.
Mm,
I was talking to my husband one day, and I'm like, I'd love to write a manuscript about this.
mm,
And he had worked with a lot of clients in the past who had selective mutism. He's like, and he suggested it. He's
mm,
like, what if, because obviously this impacts children being separated from their family members. He said, what if one of them developed the selective mutism? And
mm.
it was an amazing idea, and I just ran with it.
Oh, by the way, you've gotten getting some lovely comments. Love your stories.
Oh.
Um, yeah, and so how does this book kind of help people understand what it's like for children who immigrate, especially under such stressful circumstances like the Muslim ban?
I think just by putting these kind of books out there, it's so important for kids to step outside their own experience and see
Mm,
what other kids are going through. With bibliotherapy, it's kind of it builds that empathy, I think, amongst
mm,
other kids. They see something outside themselves, and for unfortunately in the book there's a bully, and he doesn't like Iranians at all,
right.
and that came from his own father, who also didn't like Iranians.
Mhm.
And that adds, I think, for Pupa's experience. Already it was so difficult coming to this
Right,
country, being separated from her parents, being in a whole new space with her aunt and uncle. Her cousin didn't want her to stay in her
right.
room. And then there's the bully situation. It's a whole new school and environment. And then now she has to prepare for like this US Embassy interview to try to get her parents here. So it's a lot of stressors, that this one immigrant child has to experience. And I think that's what
Mhm.
it is for a lot of immigrants coming here. I've worked with a lot of immigrant children and adults,
Mm,
and the experience is not easy at all. So I think
right.
it's important for people to read these kinds of books and recognize that, have more compassion
Right.
towards, yeah, immigrants.
I think especially one thing that is so clever about how you did the book is here's a girl who she has trouble speaking up for herself. I mean, through the whole book. So a lot of times she'll say, yes, I'm fine, or she'll nod that it's okay. But then we get to see all of her thoughts and all the things that she's going through. So I think it also is good for kids and adults to think about, there could be a lot, especially with children who are not good, expressing themselves, especially if they're, in a totally new country with a new language, to think about maybe there's more going on than this person is really able to tell us right now. And it's even like she develops a really good friend who's a really lovely character with, and her mom, they're so welcoming, but even she doesn't, they realize that she's not even comfortable telling them, like they didn't even know that she had been separated from her parents. And I think it can
Absolutely.
be hard for people to understand kind of that disconnect.
Yeah.
Right.
We never know what's going on with other
Right.
people. I see it a lot in my practice. A lot of people present like everything's okay.
Hmm.
When I work with kids, same thing. But, there's a lot of hurt, I think, deep down
Right.
that people don't let on. And especially, I think, as immigrants, I noticed that you want to fly under the radar too. You don't want to draw more attention to
Yeah.
yourself, right? So you're not going to really speak up or, I mean, this is at least the people that I work with, I notice this. And so they might clam up and not stand up for themselves because they don't want to, any unnecessary negative attention on them.
Right. And you mentioned the bully who I think you kind of plant the seeds of compassion for him because we do get to meet his father and how awful he is. Um, what do you think kids can take away from this book as far as kind of balancing, having compassion for a person like that, but also not letting them bully you, like still being able to stand up for yourself?
Yeah, in the book, Poupeh, she realized why Trevor is the way he is because
Mm-hmm.
of his dad. And it went down from his dad. The same things the dad was saying, Trevor was saying to Poupeh, and she realized too that Trevor was under a lot of pressure too. The dad was putting him under a lot of pressure. Bullying doesn't come out of nowhere. There's a reason why kids are bullies, and they listen to what adults say and they repeat that. So I think it's important to understand why bullies are the way that they are. But also it's important to stand up to the bully too. You don't have to take that as
Right.
well.
Right.
Like you can understand and be compassionate, but also stand up for what if they're mean to you.
Right. And something else that really came through in the book, especially about this embassy interview, which I guess I didn't realize was something that was common. I mean, it seems like a terrible thing to ask a child to do, is to, like, basically all of this pressure on her for her parents to be able to enter the country. But
Yes.
you mentioned, or you kind of show how adults put a lot of pressure on kids to think about adult things or adult problems. I mean,
Yes.
what do you kind of want, I guess, the grown-ups to understand about the kind of how that can affect the kids?
I this is something I work with parents so much on, and is this idea of like letting children be children. Like children
Mm,
have already a lot to deal with. They don't need to deal with adult problems.
right.
And oftentimes with parents, they don't necessarily recognize this, and they might put that
Mm,
extra burden on their children. Now, I worked in a community mental health setting with a lot of kids who, um, they didn't know when their next meal was going to be, or they didn't know
mm,
as far as where they were going to live. Those
mm,
kids, they were privy to, they unfortunately they were part of these adult problems. It was their everyday life.
right.
But if you're fortunate enough not to be in that position, as an adult, I think just being mindful of what you say in front of your children.
Mm,
I work a lot with, adults now too who were very much parentified as kids. And
mm.
there's so much unnecessary anxiety that they've carried for so many years because of that.
And I want to make sure we have time to talk. I feel like I could go on talking about that book, but also to have time to talk about your new one. Like you said, just came
Yes.
out a few weeks ago. My name is Harriet Mansoor, not Harry Mansoor. And you also have a sequel coming out, I think next spring,
Yes,
right? My name is Hangame. I don't know, how do you say
yes. My name is Hangame, not Harriet Mansoor.
on here?
Yes.
So tell us about the series and what was the inspiration behind it.
Yes, so the series is semi-autobiographical about
Mm,
my time growing up in the suburbs of Los Angeles in the 80s. It
mm,
takes place now, but it's very much about a lot of things that happened to me back then. And back then it wasn't very diverse in the suburbs that I grew up
mm,
in. It was maybe a handful of brown kids in my school district. And so it wasn't easy at all. I can, I can laugh about it now, so many
mm.
years later, and being so removed from it. But back then, it was really difficult. Um, uh, that one's a lot more based around my life than say something.
Well, actually, that brings me to something I was curious about because
Yes.
your books, you were so funny. I mean, like because I've read another interview with you, and your books are quite funny,
Oh, thank
even
you.
though it's about very serious topics. So, but that doesn't come across as, I mean, the humor in it doesn't come across as too like disrespectful or like taking things too lightly. So, how did you find that balance about being able to find kind of those funny moments at the same time as you're taking kids and their feelings very seriously? Like it seems like that would be a kind of a hard balance to do.
Yeah, that was my natural inclination when I first started writing, is just having that humor in it. And I
Mhm.
think as a middle schooler back then, the humor was my defense mechanism. It
Mm.
was kind of like taking all eyes off of me and making jokes. And so I
Right,
think that started back then. But
right.
look, a lot of the books I read growing up too they were really funny. Roald Dahl, Judy Blume. I really enjoyed that, and it captivated me, and it took me out of my own problems.
Mm.
And I think in my writing, that's what I'd like to do with the readers, is like that they laugh and they enjoy it, but also that there's some kind of underlying message underneath it all.
Mm.
Um, one of my favorite series is Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and I
Yes.
think Jeff Kinney does that amazing. The family dynamics is just it's perfect.
Right, right. Yeah, those are, my kids love those books.
Oh yeah, they're the
Yeah.
best. Mine too. Yeah.
Well, and so in this series, you know, about Harriet, as well as the Poupeh Babaee, it's a lot about finding your voice and
Yes.
kids learning to speak up for themselves. Like Harriet has to do it, you know, because again, we have like bullying, we have family problems, and she has to learn to speak up for herself. What do you want kids to take away from these books?
Yeah, that idea of speaking up for yourself, that's kind of been a theme in my own life too. Again, um, when you want to go under the radar and not have
Mhm.
people bully you and make fun of you, you don't really stand up for yourself. And that
Right.
that was a process for me to learn myself, as far as like it's okay to stand up and it's okay to take space as well. I think that was a
Mhm.
huge thing for me. And it's something I'm still consciously working on too,
Right.
all these years later.
Yeah.
But that was the main theme in both of the books, is that it's
Mhm.
it's okay to stand up for yourself and speak up for what you believe in. And look, a lot of the adults in your life might not agree, but
Mhm.
as long as you're not being mean, it's okay to say those things.
Right.
Yeah.
And I also, along those lines, you said in an interview that the message of your books was all kids matter, all feelings matter, and people should be nice to each other. That's
Oh
it.
yeah.
So, why is that so important for kids to hear? I think for all of us
Everyone.
to hear. Yeah.
Everyone should hear that, Leona. The
Mm,
adults, um, it starts with the adults actually. The
mm,
adults need to be nicer to each other.
right.
Unfortunately, I think currently there's a lot of mean people out there and a lot of people saying not nice things to one another.
Mhm.
And guess what? All those kids are watching that and they're mimicking it. And I think it's so important for kids to understand that, yeah, and I think that's why own voices and diverse voices and all that is so important too, is stepping outside of yourself and seeing other experiences,
Mm,
and having that empathy as well.
right.
But yeah, it has to start with the adults, I think.
Do you think it's changed any? I mean, you mentioned a little bit that like your books, the Harriet Mansoor, is kind of autobiographical from when you grew up in the '80s, even though it's set in the present day. do you think it's changed? Like, were there some things that you had to say, okay, well, maybe it's not like that anymore. Maybe her school would be a little more diverse, or do you feel like there was some big changes? Obviously, in Poupeh Babaee, there's the Muslim travel ban,
Yes.
which was different. But do you see other big changes in maybe the situation for somebody that might immigrate now versus uh, when you came over?
You know, it's interesting, Leanna, the school district and the town that I live in, I moved back to as an adult
Oh,
once
wow.
I had children. And
Mhm.
it's so diverse now. It's so diverse. My kids go to the same school and it's their classrooms are so diverse. It's a very different situation.
Mm,
So thankfully they're not experiencing any of that.
that's
So I think
amazing.
there's a whole lot more diversity than it was back then, but it's still, I think immigrating here is difficult regardless.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. So what's next for you? I mean, we talked about you have a sequel to Harriet Mansour coming out in the spring. Will there be a third book, you think,
Oh,
or
I hope
will you do
so.
another graphic novel?
I don't know yet about a third one, but
Oh,
I'm currently working on the revisions for the sequel,
okay.
and that one's great. She is has to move to the valley and live with her uncle, and there's
Mm.
go to a whole new school and everything. So I've been trying to add a lot of humor and jokes to that one. So
Nice.
that's been wonderful. I've written a lot of manuscripts, and yeah, hopefully something else comes out. I don't know.
Do you
Yeah.
ever, what is it about middle grade that you like? I mean, do you think you might try a different age group, or is this kind of your sweet spot?
You know, I tried writing picture books, and my agent and I decided
That's
I'm
not
not
it.
very good at it at all. It's so strange. It's so few words, but it's so difficult. It's
Right.
very, very difficult. And kudos to all those, authors who are doing picture books. Again, I think with middle grade, because it was such a formative time and such a
Right.
difficult time in my own life, I think it's easy for me to write for that age group. Yeah, it's my favorite
Well,
one to write in. Yeah.
oh, I love it's one of my favorite ones to read. So
Yes.
it's fun and really wonderful books. Thank you for taking the time to talk with
Oh,
us
of course,
today.
Anna. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Haleh, it was such a pleasure to talk with you.
You
And
as well.
thank you for doing the giveaway. If
Oh,
anybody
absolutely.
watching, if you haven't entered yet, it ends tonight at midnight. So make sure you enter. You could win a signed copy
Yes.
of both of our books. So
Yes.
thank you so much.
Thank you
Anybody,
for having me.
yes, and I'm sorry, I cut you off. I was just going to say if you joined us late, you can see the whole thing. It'll be up on Instagram in just a few minutes, and then later I'll have it on the YouTube channel as well. All
Thank you,
right.
Leanna. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.